All right, hello wine drinking people. Today is Friday, July 8th, and I've been salivating about this day all week, thinking about the vintage Brunello di Montalcino, Uccelliera Casibas, Madonna del Piano, and hey, it has excited me so much that I decided to put out a vintage Brunello di Montalcino offer today. One of the great producers, one of the great new producers of Montalcino, you know, because while this area is relatively new, if you look at even the secondary wave of producers didn't come till the 60s. The first wave was pretty much beyond Asante by itself in the latter part of the 19th century. And then, like I said, the second wave in the 60s. And then the 80s, like Andrea Cortonesi, the gentleman that's founded this winery, 1986. So relative newcomer to Montalcino, but some fabulous wines, and they've been gaining a serious head of steam with the critics. And in vintages like 2008 and 2005, the last two, I don't want to say off vintages, but maybe vintages that weren't so highly regarded by the critics. These guys make great wines, some of the highest scoring wines in the vintage. The 2005 Brunello Montalcino, 94 points from Antonio Galloni, and then the Rosso di Montalcino from 2008, which was a lighter vintage, at 88 points. Even their Rosso scores incredibly high, and these wines are in the bottle, you know, and it's great when you see one of the top producers, 2006 Brunello Montalcino from this producer, scored 96 points. There's not many people that scored higher than that in the Wine Advocate. $60 a bottle on this offering. Well, 2006, unlike 2005, a stunning vintage. We have had major members of the press come out and say one of the greatest vintages ever. We've got 3 quotes here from James Suckling just bragging about the metamorphic nature of this vintage, how these wines just evolve in the glass and change, something that only happens in great vintages. And then, of course, Antonio Galloni, we've got a couple of great quotes from him about this vintage, of course, soon to be legendary in Montalcino. And hey, these wines are out right now, folks. If you love Brunello di Montalcino, you want to put some of these 06 vintage Brunellos in your cellar. Hey, we're going to be tasting some vintages of Brunello going back to 95 tonight. And I'll tell you, I've had the 95 Uccelliera Casibas. Absolutely spectacular. Drinking in its prime right now. So you really need to hold on to these wines for another 10 years. All right, well, this producer, I'm going to call it Ucceliera. It sits above the aviary farmland, and it existed since the 11th century. Well, as we said, Andrea Cortonesi resurrected it in 1986 and began to transform this vineyard into land again, into vineyard land again, and a wine cellar, and continuing to produce greater and greater wines on the 6 hectares named after the hill which it lies on, and you know, really fabulous site. And as I mentioned before, you know, the producer, you know, all important, because there's so many great wines made in Montalcino. There's so many great vineyard areas there. But when you have someone that has the passion and the desire to make great wine like Andrea does, you see what is the potential is here. And still, as I mentioned before, at a reasonable price. When you look, this is a tiny producer. We get 5 cases of their Brunello every year. 3 to 5 cases, and $60 a bottle, 96 points from the Advocate. You cannot drink points, but let me tell you, these wines sell out very quickly, so don't wait to hit the respond button on this one, all right? Because these wines, this Brunello 2006 from Ucccelliera will be gone without too much delay. All right, folks, I'm your host, Andrew Lampasoni. Check out all the older vintage wines from Ucccelliera we have on this offer. Well, we just have a few bottles of 99 and 2001 Riserva, which we found hanging around in the back. All right, I'm your host, Andrew Lampasoni, signing off, saying, remember, always drink the good stuff first.